Today I'm going to be talking about George Orwell, a bit of a bio, and then we're going to talk about Shooting an Elephant, which is a short story that he composed. Orwell was born Eric Arthur Blair on the 25th of June in 1903 in India. He was the son of a British colonial civil servant. Educated in England at Eton. Then he joined the Indian Imperial Police in Burma, which was then a British colony. He resigned in 1927 and decided that he wanted to become a writer. In 1928, he moved to Paris, where lack of success as a writer forced him into tradesman's jobs, menial labor. He described his experiences in his first book, Down and Out in Paris and London, which was published in 1933. He took the name George Orwell shortly before it was published. His second novel came out a little later in 1934, Burmese Days. So a lot of political beliefs as far as he's concerned. So he was an anarchist in the late 20s. By the early 30s, he considered himself more socialist in nature. In 1936, he was commissioned to write an account of poverty among unemployed miners in northern England, which resulted in The Road to Wigan Pier, which he published in 1937. In 1936, he traveled to Spain to fight for the Republicans against Franco's nationalists, and he was forced to leave and flee for his life from Soviet-backed communists who were suppressing these socialist dissenters, which turned him into a lifelong anti-Joseph Stalinist. In 1941-1943, he worked on propaganda for the BBC. In 1943, he became a literary editor of The Tribune, which was a weekly left-wing magazine. By this point in his life, by 1943, he was a prolific journalist, continued writing articles, reviews, and books. 1945, Animal Farm was published. It was a political fable set in a farmyard, but it was based on Stalin's betrayal of the Russian Revolution. It made Orwell's name and ensured that he was financially comfortable for the rest of his life, for the first time in his life too, for that matter. 1984 followed up 4 years later, and that one has been probably the most popular of all of his stories. It's set in like a futuristic totalitarianism. Ooh. Totalitarianism. That's a mouthful. So it's entered into pop culture. Many phrases, many ideas in the book, like "Big Brother is watching you," "Newspeak," "doublethink," are all words that entered into pop culture. By this point, his health was deteriorating, and he died of tuberculosis on 21st of January, 1950. Okay, let's talk about Shooting an Elephant. So, written in 1936, it was about his time as a young policeman in Burma, and it explores kind of the relationship, I guess, between the Europeans and the colonists that lived there in the colonies. So Orwell begins the story by relating some of his memories from his time as a young police officer. And the natives, they hated them. They hated the British. They hated the English, government. They did not like another body of people coming in and forcing them to obey the rules, and this was their land. And so he talks at first about the Burmese men that tripped him up during football matches, and the local priests loudly insulting colonizers on the streets. And so he talks about those two things kind of like before. he tells us then that these experiences instilled in him two things. That imperialism was an evil thing, but also it inspired hatred between the imperialists and their native subjects. So he was ready to get out of this job when it happened. All right, so he finds himself caught in the middle here because he's sympathetic towards the natives, but it also, he had a job to do, a task to complete, and so that was, he's kind of caught in the middle. But so he says he found himself caught in the middle between the hatred of the empire he served and his rage against the evil-spirited little beast who tried to make his job miserable. Or impossible, I'm sorry. All right, so then he gets to the main story, which is the story of the elephant. And I just realized that this text, I did not do a good job of copying that. Fan over rubbish fan. Okay, so I didn't miss anything. It's just kind of awkwardly printed. All right, so the main story that he's going to tell is takes place in Moulmein in Lower Burma. So there's an elephant, and it's one of the tame elephants that the locals use that people ride about on, and it does work and that kind of thing. So it gave its rider, Mahout, it's the Indian name, the slip, and it started wreaking havoc all throughout the open air bazaar, the open air market that they have. It destroyed a hut, killed a cow, raided some fruit stalls for food. So Orwell picks up his rifle, gets on his horse, and rides to see what he can do. So he had a rifle, an old .44 Winchester, and much too small to kill an elephant. He thought that the noise might be effective. It might scare the animal or stop him from his, forward progress of mass destruction, Wreck-It Ralphing that he's doing. So when he gets there, he discovered that the elephant had just trampled a man, a coolie, which is a native laborer, knocked him to the ground and killed him, ran over him. Which is, now we are at a different level, right? Because he's killed a cow, he's tore up some stuff, some destruction, but now he's killed a man. So that is where he is, his native coolie. I'm trying to keep up with it in the text. There we go. So Orwell sends his horse away, his pony, and calls for an elephant rifle, which would be a larger caliber that would, if not take the beast down, would, mortally injure him in some way and he would die. So he starts searching for the elephant, and he finds it just kind of chilling, eating some grass in the field like a cow, just kind of harmless. And he's just definitely, just hanging out like nothing even happened. So at this point, crowds of thousands of local Burmese people have gathered, and they're watching what he's going to do. Now, the elephant has stopped its progress. It is no longer wild and crazy and running around and stomping everybody into the ground. But he also has killed somebody. So, he's wreaked havoc. But, he realizes in that moment that the crowd is gathered to see him do this job, to kill this elephant. And he realizes that he will lose face if he doesn't. Both on his own, personally, and as an imperial representative, if he doesn't do what the crowd expects. And so he shoots the elephant from a safe distance, marveling at how long it takes this elephant to die. Kind of graphic there. He didn't want to shoot the elephant. But he also didn't want to lose face. So he acknowledges that fact that he did not wish to look like a fool. So that's why he shot the elephant. So this is obviously more than just his killing of the elephant. He even tells us at the very beginning of the story that it was a tiny incident in and of itself, but he says it gave me a better glimpse than I had before of the real nature of imperialism, the real motives for which despotic governments act. The surprise is that these governments don't merely just stomp their boot down upon people without caring what they think of them, but rather they do care greatly what these native tribes, native peoples, what they think of them, and they care about being judged, and they care about how they are viewed by their subjects. So shooting an elephant is really about how those in power act when they are aware that they have an audience. Our behavior, so much of our behavior is shaped not by what we want to do, nor even by what we think is right, but what others will think of us. And you think that's really true still for today. So Orwell confesses that he spent his whole life trying to avoid being laughed at, and that's his key motivation, really, when dealing with the elephant, is that he does not want to invite ridicule or laughter from the Burmese people that are watching him. He says, to come all that way, rifle in hand, with 2,000 people marching at my heels, and then to trail feebly away having done nothing, no, that was impossible. The crowd would laugh at me, and my whole life, every white man's life in the East, was one long struggle not to be laughed at. So not just him, but the psychology of every imperial agent. They care about the way that they are perceived by these native peoples. He goes on to imagine what grisly death he would face if he shot the elephant and missed, if he was trampled like the hapless coolie that the elephant had killed. And he says even that would bring laughter, right? And if that had happened, it was quite probable that some of them would laugh. So he couldn't let that happen either. From this point, he kind of takes his own experience and kind of like puts it up against like the whole colonial experience at large. The white European may think he is in charge of his colonial subjects, but ironically, it is the colonizer, the white European, who loses his own freedom when he takes it upon himself to rule another people. He says, I perceived in this moment that when the white man turns tyrant, it is his own freedom that he destroys. He becomes a sort of hollow, posing dummy, the conventionalized figure of a sahib. For it is the condition of his rule that he shall spend his life in trying to impress the natives. And so in every crisis he has got to do what the natives expect of him. He wears a mask and his face grows to fit it. So we have two intriguing kind of paradoxes here. Imperial rulers actually care about how their subjects view them, even if they don't care about the subjects, because they did not at all. And the one who colonizes loses his own freedom when he takes away the freedom of others, because he's forced to play the role of the gentleman, setting an example for the wild natives and trying to impress them. He is the alien in their land, not them. Orwell was aware of the absurdities, as here was I, the white man with his gun, standing in front of the unarmed native crowd, seemingly the leading actor of the piece, but in reality I was only an absurd puppet, pushed to and fro by the will of those yellow faces behind. So he repeats himself several times. I did not in the least want to shoot him. I had no intention of shooting the elephant. I did not in the least want to shoot him, but I did not want to shoot the elephant. He says multiple times. It becomes, abhorrent to him that he's having to do this, but he does it. But it also shows how powerless he is in the face of what's happening, even though he acknowledges it's unjust and financially wasteful. He does it anyway to save face, which goes against his own will and instinct.